everyone, and welcome to one of the few remaining transportation sales tax info sessions. Thank you so much for coming out. The hosts today are a mixture of advocacy groups and neighborhood groups. I just want to run through those real quick. I am Belvin Olsop with the Charleston Climate Coalition. We also have Charleston Moves, Coastal Conservation League, East Coast Greenway Alliance, and March Project reporting in. And then we have Hampton Park Terrace Neighborhood Association, North Central Neighborhood Association, Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association, and the West Side Neighborhood Association as the host groups for tonight. Thank you so much for coming out and engaging. This sales tax would represent $4.25 billion of transportation funding over the next 25 years. It's a highly consequential project, and our goal is to get the public to be weighing in, to be gathering themselves, to be coming out to these data gathering sessions and info sessions. Show of hands, who here got here by bike? By public transit? By car? Okay, that's data. I think walking, who walked here? Okay, oh, that's nice.
Outside the electric, but not.
Yeah, EV. The run-up show tonight will be beginning with a presentation from the county, Eric Adams, on the transportation sales tax, the current status of it, the history behind it, where we're at right now. And then there'll be a small Q&A with Eric where you can ask clarifying questions about what you just saw. Then the advocacy groups will be giving you some of our visions, and priorities for the low country's transportation future. And then finally, we will have a broader Q&A and comment session at the end where you can share your feedback, thoughts, and opinions and questions. Without further ado, let's hear for Eric Adams with the county.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. So great introduction, kind of set the stage there perfectly. Is this working?
Yeah.
You all hear me all right? Okay, perfect. So beautiful night to be down here, and just thank you all again for being out here tonight. You know, this is phase 2 of our public outreach process. So what we're really trying to do is encourage participation from the public, asking questions, filling out the survey, being involved in the process, and really developing a transparent process. So that the public can be involved and understand how projects are selected and how we get from the beginning to, eventually to where this is potentially a ballot measure in November. But I will say County Council has not made a final decision on that yet. So your input is important, right? If they still have a draft plan that can be tweaked, there still has to be an ordinance read 3 times before it actually goes to the Election Commission. So your feedback is important. And again, thank you for being here. So why are we here? Most of you probably know there are existing sales taxes in place, 2 half pennies. First one started in 2004. The second one is in 2016. So the 2004 was 25 years or $1.3 billion, whichever comes first. So that's expected to happen in 2027. So with that first sales tax expiring, we're really at a crossroads, a decision crossroads for County Council and for the public of Charleston County. Do we extend that tax moving forward or not? So this would be an extension of that first sales tax. So we got some statistics here of things that have been accomplished through the program. I won't bore you with all the details, but a lot of times we get questions of what have you done? Where has all the money gone? Seems like nothing's been done, etc. And one thing I will say is engineers, as an engineer by trade, and our staff as engineers, we don't do a really good job, and we have not done a good enough job selling those accomplishments and things that have been accomplished. Most of the time, the project manager tasked with designing, building, and then once it's over, they move on to the next project. So that's something that we accept, but we have put together some statistics around that. We developed a map here just for some context of projects just on the Peninsula area that have been done throughout the years. So B and Courtney was back as part of the first initial sales tax with improvements there, improvements kind of in the West Ashley area, but just some dots there. And then another thing that I'd like to talk about is our pavement management system. You can see that on the next slide of roads. So that's our resurfacing program. where we'll resurface roads and preserve roads over time. So pavement management is a big part of what we do, and that's trying to keep our good roads in good condition. And I will say they're not where we want them to be, right? Our roads could be in better shape than they are. We acknowledge that. Just driving down Calhoun Street, it's just, the dodging the potholes and bumps, right? Some of that can be attributed to settlement over time, but we have addressed it, believe it or not, as part of the 2004, but it's probably due for it again, right? It's probably due for it again. One thing that's important to note is most of the roads in Charleston County are not owned by Charleston County. They're not mostly owned by the city or the municipalities. They're mostly owned by the state Department of Transportation, by the state level. About 56% of secondary roads, so that's not even counting your interstates and your primary US 17s and SC 700s. And DOT, we work with them all the time. Great people, but they've got their hands full, right? They've really got a fourth largest system in the nation for one of the smaller states in the nation. They've got a lot of backlog maintenance over the years that has not been funded. So they really have their hands full. And if you look at their funding projections, what they're doing statewide, they're primarily focused on two major initiatives. One is interstates. If you drive into Georgia or North Carolina or another state, and then you come back into South Carolina, you can notice a difference, right? So they're really trying to put a lot of their resources into the interstate system. The second thing they're primarily focused on is bridges, specifically in the upstate. A lot of these bridges are 60+ years old. There was one back in the fall of last year that unexpectedly collapsed. So major safety concern around bridges, right? We can't have bridges collapsing. So a lot of their focus is in interstates, bridges, larger type projects. They're not as focused on the intersections and the corridor widenings, those types of things that we're going to talk about, or that we have the ability to address as a community locally, that the sales tax allows that opportunity to address. So looking into the future, last fall, County Council formed a special committee to discuss the transportation sales tax program. And I will mention Councilman Rob Werman is here, who represents part of the Peninsula. Thank you for being here, sir. And they did that for an intentional purpose so that it could be discussed in public and transparent. So those things are on their agenda to set aside specific time to discuss the sales tax program in public. So as we move forward, as I mentioned, we're in phase 2 of the public outreach portion. Most of you know in 2024, there was a referendum that was not successful. So we did some public outreach then, but what I'll say about this one, in our initial phase, we more than doubled the amount of people involved and comments coming in. Now, this is our second phase. I'm hoping we can triple that or quadruple it with the public input. So really emphasizing the public input, the municipal participation, and also, when we look at projects, and we'll get into this, we're also looking at data around projects as well. But some statistics there, the initial phase, over 600 projects requested. We estimated that totaled about $68 billion worth of need. And we're talking this 25-year sales tax would raise $4.25 billion. So there's a big gap there, right? There's a huge gap of need, desires to actually what can be accomplished. And that sets up a stage for difficult decisions, right? The county council has to make difficult decisions. We can't fund, everything cannot be funded as part of this. So there has to be some give and take analysis. And that's what this process is. That's why this is a draft plan. And we'll continue to talk about that as we go. So through that first phase, the first outreach that we did, we developed some guiding principles, vetted those with county council to help us decide what projects or how we would select projects and what this draft plan would look like. So briefly going to roll through those. First was finish what was promised in the 2016. So we've seen over the last 6 years about a 70% increase in transportation infrastructure costs. Right, we all know inflation has happened, is happening, it's going on. We see it as citizens at the grocery store. It's affecting everyone, but it has disproportionately affected even more the transportation infrastructure industry. 70% increase, meaning some of our initial estimates, they're being exceeded, right? So a couple projects in particular, we're projecting shortfalls on. Those are Dorchester Road and North Charleston widening and Palmetto Commerce Parkway Phase 3. We want to make sure that a little bit of the funding for this potential third would address that so we could finish those projects that were promised as part of the 2016. Major thing we heard from the first round, congestion, congestion, congestion. That was a consistent theme in the public comment and in the polling that we did. So making sure that as we do this, we're addressing congestion along with other needs. But the other subtlety to that was equity around the county, geographic equity. So it shouldn't all be focused in metropolitan area. The rural areas needed representation as well. Supporting multimodal mobility. So heard a lot about people wanting the ability to not have to get in their car all the time. They want ability to have safe access on sidewalks, to have safe bike facilities and so forth. So that needs to be an important element of this plan. Using Greenbelt to manage growth. That was another dominant theme, was frustration around growth of the county. Charleston is an extremely popular place to live, right? It's a beautiful place. We have a lot of growth going on. We hear that frustration, and Greenbelt was identified as a way to offset some of that growth by preserving land. Building resilient infrastructure. So one of the things as a public works director that I deal with daily is drainage concerns around drainage. And a lot of times we're seeing, and I know those of you who live on the peninsula, which I'm sure most of you do, the overtopping of roads due to tidal flooding, the sunny day flooding. So how can we develop this plan and have parts of that address resiliency around that? So what can we do to prevent that kind of overtopping or flooding? We see this not only on the peninsula, but in other areas of the county that are next to marsh areas where the king tides are now coming in and overtopping. So could we develop elements of the program to help address that as well? And finally, ensuring transparency and accountability. So making sure that not only is this process transparent, but if we move forward, that the public understands where these taxpayer dollars are going, what is being accomplished, what's planned to be accomplished, and a way to hold the county accountable for delivering on those things. So developing a plan that continues with transparency and also accountability on delivering on the things that are put forward. So timeline where we are today. So we're in March. We're on our second phase. We've got the draft plan is developed. So we're on the second phase where we're seeking that input on the draft plan. What do you like? What do you not like about that? We plan to take this information that we gained through the survey, through these meetings and through some polling that we'll do back to county council in April, present that to them. This is what we've heard about the draft plan that you've approved. That will allow council time to make any adjustments, any tweaks to the plan. With the ultimate deadline of in August, we have to have it submitted to the South Carolina Election Commission so that it can potentially get on the ballot. So we work our timeline a little bit back from there. Have to have 3 readings of an ordinance before that can happen as well. But this is where we are in the timeline. So we'll go back to county council in April, and then hopefully we have it finalized in May. The 3 readings of the ordinance can happen. We submit it in August, and then it's potentially in the ballot box in November of this year. All right, so here's an overview of the plan. Looking broadly, we've kind of started referring to it as the pie and the pie slices. The pie is not fully baked yet. It's still in the oven, right? We could still make some tweaks to it. This is how it stands now. Greenbelt program at 690 million, little over 16%. Public transit at 860 million. And then infrastructure projects at 64%. So this was presented, or this was the result of county council deliberations and adjustments to the staff recommended plan. And this is what was voted on to move forward as the draft plan. Now, what we'll do is we kind of categorized all the infrastructure into one slice, just to give you kind of a broad context overview of the major categories. The next slide, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into the different aspects of the infrastructure. So what I'll do is I'll start kind of up at the top and work my way around the pie So at the very top, we'll go around clockwise, is pavement management at 390 million. So right now, we fund pavement management about $10 million a year. We project we need about $27 million a year to maintain our overall condition index where it is today. So without additional funding for our pavements, we can expect a decline over time. And the way that system works is we go around every 4 years with an automated van. We measure the cracks in the road, the depressions. We have accelerometers to measure the bumpiness and roughness. So we use that system to develop maintenance plans moving forward for our resurfacing. So we're not always doing the worst road first. You may want to get that kind of thought process a lot, like, why aren't you working on Calhoun Street? That's the worst road I know of. And it could be, very well could be right the worst. However, it's going to be very expensive to fix. So a lot of times we're developing plans to maintain our overall condition index. Analogy I like to use is if you have a wooden deck outside of your house, you wouldn't wait 25 years and then just totally rebuild the thing. Every couple of years, you want to go put a seal coat on it to try to keep it in good shape. We try to do that, take that approach, preventative maintenance approach with our roads as well. So we'll do more seal coats and surface treatments. We can do that a lot more economically feasible than we can going around fixing all the worst roads first. If we did that, our network condition index would just decline over time. Two other elements in that pavement management. One is a rural road safety program. So addressing narrow shoulders in the rural area. We have data from BCD-COG that tells us where we have off-road safety issues. We can use that data to go out and maybe do some shoulder widening as part of that. Right now, we don't do that. We just work on the existing surface. That would give us that opportunity to do more of that. Also in that category would be a resiliency element, $2 million a year to kind of build up some of these roads that we know over top due to flooding or due to king tides is what we're looking at. So we look at that with elevation data. Caveat to that, roads downtown are a little more difficult, right? Because you have sidewalks and inlets for drainage. So we can't just, it's not as easy as just adding asphalt, right? Because then we would be blocking the drainage or too high. So there has to be some engineering judgment in how we would approach that. But that is an element of that slice of the pie. As I mentioned, finish what was promised. That is included in that 133 million, the next slice. As we keep working our way around, we've got signal coordination at 25 million. That would be $1 billion a year to work on synchronizing corridor signalization. So one of the most frustrating things can be if you're driving down a road and you go from red light to red light to red light and stopping. So how can we use technology to more efficiently move traffic through that corridor? Rather than widening a road, why don't we time the signals better to move traffic through that corridor more quickly? So that's what that funding is identified for, is more smart signals or adaptive signal controls that can be more responsive to the existing traffic situations. And hopefully that we're going to try to develop that regionally. So it's not just in one area or another area, because we know traffic is not confined by areas, right? It's regional. Next section is the intersection safety program. So we'll talk about those projects in a little bit, but the concept with the intersection safety program was to have kind of a quick start group of projects that we could implement quickly to improve congestion and safety, that were supported by the municipality, the public, but also supported by SCDOT, because we need their permission through an encroachment permit to make those improvements. So we're trying to find known congestion problems. DOT supports it, community supports it, which means we should be able to get through that design and permitting process much quicker, get those projects to construction quicker so we can show the public progress and have quicker progress. Intersections, we can do a little bit quicker than we can these larger, more complex, widening corridors. Really complex projects take more time to work through that design, environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition. And then you finally get to construction. Construction ends up being one of the shorter segments of the project. It takes longer to design and get through that than it does to actually build the road. So with this intersection, we're trying to find projects that are impactful around congestion safety that we can deliver quickly. The next is the largest slice. That's the feature project. So those are more of your regionally significant, multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollar projects, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Next slice, something we heard in the first round was projects take too long. Why is it taking so long to get them to construction? So mentioned there are processes we have to follow. But we can expedite the projects and start them all initially and try to move them forward. We won't have the money collected in time to build it, so that revenue won't come in as fast as we will need it. So to borrow the money or move that money forward to have it available to go to construction, we're gonna have to pay to borrow. Anytime you borrow money, right? If you borrow money for a car or a house, you gotta pay interest on that money. So we've set aside some funding to address that. That helps us expedite or deliver projects quicker. An argument can be made if you build it sooner, your construction price is only gonna go up over time. So if we can get it to construction faster, that will offset some of that borrowing cost. And then finally, bike and pedestrian improvements at 75 million. Those are specific to existing, there's different components of that. Some of that going to a countywide development of a plan or element where we can work with all the rural municipalities, not the big three, develop a plan and address bike ped prioritization through that. Then we also want to give the municipalities more discretion over some of their existing plans. So like City of Charleston has their SS4A program that they've developed, Safe Streets for All. So providing some funding for that. On James Island, there's the Rethink Folly Road, so it'll identify some funding for that. Mount Pleasant has Mount Pleasant Way. North Charleston has the Low Country Rapid Transit Project, what they call the last mile segments. So segments of sidewalk that will connect and get people to those bus stations. So identifying some funding for that as well. All right, next slide. So a lot of, how did we come up with the project list? So this is kind of the scoring matrix that we used to vet our projects to come up with a candidate list of projects. So public and municipal support was weighted along with congestion criteria. We used data from the BCD COG, who is the regional transportation experts, and also use safety data as well to evaluate these projects and develop that candidate list of projects. So these are the metrics of how we used all those, the 600 projects that came in. This is how they were vetted and funneled down into a smaller list of projects. And this is the overall map, just to give you kind of some context of where these projects are located. The orange ones are the intersection ones that I mentioned, which are the smaller projects that we hope to deliver more quickly. The green ones are what we refer to as the feature projects. And then we've got the North Bridge listed in blue as a bike ped, primarily bike ped. And one thing I will caveat with a tweak that we made, we had the North Bridge in bike ped slice initially. We moved that over to the infrastructure slice. That's why the bike ped slice looks a little bit smaller than it was before. The reason behind that is DOT, again, DOT owns most of these roads and bridges. They're looking at that bridge. It's over 60 years old. It's already been widened once. It's not in the best of shape. So they're studying it for replacement. We're hoping that if this moves forward and it is successful, that we can go to them with the money that we would have for the standalone bike ped, use that to leverage a full replacement of that bridge. So you don't end up with two structures next to each other. So if they're looking at replacing it in the next few years, why wouldn't we just work together to just have one structure with bike ped rather than two structures? So that's what we're looking for there. Specific to the peninsula, the 225 million is allocated for the battery extension project, which would address also the Calhoun corridor and medical district. There's funding identified in there for Haygood Avenue as well, the flooding there, specific to the peninsula. On our website, we have all these in detail with the specific amounts listed. So we can dive into those in more detail. I won't go through them all with you tonight, just for sake of time, but happy to stay after or answer any questions you may have on this. So call to action, again, we're really just hopeful and just encouraging everyone to get involved. So we have going out into the public. If you would like a speaker for your neighborhood association, let us know. We'll do everything we can to make it there. Staying informed on our website where our survey is at charlestontransportation.com. And then we also have an email address where you can email us at tst@publicintimate.com and we can receive your feedback that way. Final slide is our QR code, which will take you directly to our survey. And just encourage you all to get out there, get on there and take that survey and have your voice heard.
Thank you, Eric. Let's hear from Eric Adams with the county. Does anyone have questions or need clarification on what they just heard?
Hey, Eric, the categories in the big pie chart, how does that, couple of questions, this is one. How does it roughly compare to the previous TST, the proportions? Without going too much into that, yeah.
Yes, I think.
One back from that, because you can, there you go, that's my, yeah.
Right, so I want to say, and we got Eric Davis here with our Greenbelt program. I think Greenbelt was 10 and 17, and then 10.
17 for sales tax and 10.
And then 10. Transit was lower in the first, but higher in the second because of the Low Country Rapid Transit project. It was at like, I think it was around 20+% in the second one, to specifically for the Low Country Rapid Transit project. The infrastructure number is roughly the same. It's been around that 65 or so percent, pretty consistently in the other two. And we have that information on the website. You can get precise information.
Very good, thank you. And then I was curious about the paper program, because how do you gel that up? How do you match that up with state? Because all those roads you're working on are also state roads. Like, you know, state's doing some of it, you're doing some of it. How do we split that? Because we're paying for all of it.
Yes, so one thing that's important to note is in Charleston County, our percentage of good roads are actually 73% better than other counties. And that's because of the investment of the sales tax over time. And we work with DOT, and what our kind of agreement with them is the county will work more so on the neighborhood streets and the smaller secondary roads. And they'll invest more of their efforts in the primary routes. So the more of the US 17s routes. I feel like our staff is a little more responsive to neighborhood situation, maybe so than the DOT is. We kind of do that work a little more than they would. So to hopefully answer your question, our efforts are not detracting from the amount of money the state is putting into the system though. Right, so they're still putting money into the system as well. That's why if you look overall, and again, a caveat, I know our roads aren't where we want them to be condition wise, but Charleston County is in a better situation than most other counties. If you look at the condition index of the paved network.
Any other questions?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about things that don't make it to like the larger docket. I talked to Director Mathis a lot about smaller, we did a crosswalk here and here. Some of those have been submitted to TST for the annual process of allocation. And if we are not selected for those, how can we as neighborhoods continue to advocate for those projects to be put in? I know one of the that you showed is a crosswalk in our neighborhood, and I think in that situation, we're letting great get in the way of good there, because we could just use zebra stripes and instead it's like big bump outs. And so how can we advocate if those projects don't get selected for the annual docket? And if you just talk a little bit about that portion.
Yes, so for those of you who don't know, the 2004 sales tax, there was an annual allocation program that was developed. So each year there's funding that's identified from that program, and that'll actually, even though collections are going to stop in 2027, that'll go till 2031 in that program before it stops. And that funds bike ped at $1 million a year, intersections at $2 million a year, resurfacing at $4 million a year, and local paving at $2 million a year. The way that system works is the municipalities, whoever owns the road can submit a request, or whatever jurisdiction represents the area and submit a request. And that's so that they will eventually maintain it if it is awarded or funded. But those projects are ranked through a council approved objective criteria, scoring criteria. It's basically a cost benefit analysis. So we get every year, just in the bike ped, we're probably getting $30 to $40 million worth of projects requested, and we've got $1 billion a year to fund it. So what ends up happening by nature of a cost benefit analysis is the lower the cost with a high benefit gets funded. So a lot of times we're doing very small segments of sidewalk or crosswalk improvements, a very kind of smaller type, but it's a ranking system as part of that process. What we're trying to do with this program, the 2026, if it moves forward, is give the municipalities a little more discretion around funding of their priorities within their existing plans. City of Charleston, for example, has the Safe Streets for All program. So if they have a segment of sidewalk that may not score well because of the length, it may be a $500,000 project, it's not going to score well in the existing system. They would have an allocation that they could kind of have more discretion over what was selected moving forward. So that's the potential for that program. Advocating for the existing program, I think, would be working with your transportation director on those projects, understanding the scoring matrix that's used and how the cost benefit analysis, what are those benefit point systems, and I can share that with you so you understand how the projects are ranked.
Let's have one more question and then move on to next phase.
If this asset extension does not get approved, what percentage, if not all of them, of these projects will take place or not take place under the 6% state sales tax?
So, to my knowledge, none of these would get funded. Yeah, so I don't think none of these projects are on DOT's radar for implementation anytime soon. In Charleston County, their primary focus, now they have a resurfacing program, it's a small, on the primary routes, but they're really looking, they've got Long Point Road ramp over by the port, and they've got the Low Country corridor where they're looking at 526, 26 interchange, but also widening of 526 from West Ashley all the way around to Mount Pleasant. That's their kind of primary Charleston County focus.
Let's hear one more time for Eric. You can ask your more questions at the end of the evening, but for now, we'll be moving on to some of the host organizations talking through some visions for Charleston Transportation Future. We'll start off with Tori Sanders, CCL.
Me okay? Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Tori Sanders. I'm here with the Coastal Conservation League. As we know, Charleston County is growing faster than almost anywhere in the country, and how we choose to invest this tax will determine whether that growth strengthens our communities or continues to strain them. So, this coalition that we've developed is really united around a simple belief that the best transportation and land use investments are the ones that serve everyone, not just car drivers. And so we've spent months working alongside Charleston News, Charleston Climate Coalition, Keys Greenway, and others to identify where this tax can deliver the most lasting value. And our coalition here found that the greatest opportunities are in protecting land before it's gone, funding transit that actually moves people, and making it safe to walk and bike. And together, these investments don't just address congestion, they're addressing the root causes of it. And our main principles here that we developed are that everyone deserves to make it home safely. Transportation and green space investment should focus on reducing sprawl and expanding public access to nature. Our tax dollars should prioritize freedom of choice for all modes of transportation, not just car trips. And we should prioritize projects with the highest long-term ROI for the community over expensive long-term projects that only offer short-term congestion relief. And finally, we want to make sure that we're fixing what we already have. We want to dedicate more resources to maintenance and making existing infrastructure safer for all road users. So, there's a lot of opportunity here for this tax to fund sustainable focused policies. And, we've been looking to find ways to ensure that there's adequate and robust funding for these, sort of green opportunities. This explosive growth really requires a comprehensive, multi-pronged approach. So we really want to see robust investment in CARTA, in Greenbelt, in bike and pedestrian infrastructure, in order to address these challenges. So, you know, like I've been saying, funded appropriately, these three investments really work together as part of a unified system. Later tonight, you're gonna hear more about the benefits of bike and pedestrian infrastructure and more. And so I wanted to share a little bit about the Greenbelt program. So in case you're unaware, the Greenbelt program is a county-run program that provides funding for land protection, and it opens up access to a variety of landscapes throughout the county. You know, it's been very successful, and it really helps residents enjoy a lot of what makes the Low Country special. It reduces the potential for sprawling development in the rural parts of the county, and that in turn decreases traffic congestion and reduces the need to spend tax dollars on new and expanded roads. It also provides public access, especially to our waterways, and conserves ecologically and culturally sensitive areas and supports rural livelihoods. So, you know, it's providing this critical funding that can help steer growth towards appropriate areas and away from flood-prone regions or areas that don't have adequate infrastructure. And it helps also access funding for different municipalities to create urban green space. Property values, livability, access to nature are all improved when people have that access. We've seen projects like the Sullivan's Island Nature Trail, Morris Island, Magnolia Park and Community Gardens, the Cherokee Community Park, just to name a few. Those were all made possible through Greenbelt. So together, you know, these three investments, Greenbelt, CARTA, Bike Ped, they address traffic congestion more effectively than just road building alone. So, you know, we're here because we know that the county needs a comprehensive approach that will reduce car dependency while managing where and how growth occurs. You know, like Eric said, we're at a crossroads right now, and these decisions that we make here today about how to invest this tax revenue is going to shape the region's growth, livability, and resilience for generations to come. So what we want to really see is this comprehensive integrated approach that protects land before it's developed, allows people to move more efficiently through robust public transit, and create safe options for every mode of travel. These are mutually reinforcing investments that reduce car dependence and just increase the quality of life for everyone here. So now you're going to hear a little more about some bike and pedestrian concepts from Jim Hemphill with East Coast Greenway Alliance.
Hey y'all, how's it going? Everybody can hear me okay? I've got a sick household member at home, so that's what the mask is coming from. So I'm gonna take it off for a moment, so you can hear me okay. And I'm gonna try to do a couple of things at once, so bear with me here. So as Eric mentioned, the annual allocation program for Bike Ped, I just have to hold it. Eric mentioned the annual allocation program for Bike Ped, and sort of the model for how we've been thinking about bike ped investments over time. Our group was really interested in rethinking, how we might leverage the TST program to offer connections between some existing bike ped infrastructure projects and others that are in the pipeline. So what we did is we put together this resource. I want to point out around the room, we have these QR codes on the wall. We also up at the table have a link to this resource and some others that we've created. But this is really a way for us to visualize what we're thinking about in terms of connecting some of these existing projects. One of the great things about the TST program in the past is that it's always taken a complete streets approach to its projects. So along with these, big road projects, we've also gotten some great pieces of bike ped infrastructure. So that's, if you think about the Glen McConnell widening, there's a really great multi-use path as part of that project. Main Road Segment A also includes a multi-use path and a connection for the East Coast Greenway, which is the organization I represent. So we wanted to think about, how can we continue that complete streets legacy and ensure that we're getting bike ped and transit infrastructure with the future projects on the next TST, but also how can we leverage those bike ped funds, the set aside funds that Eric mentioned, to connect some of these pieces and really think about a holistic network. So I'm gonna walk you through this story map, but it's really meant to be explored on your own. So I hope that you'll go to the link that we have in this QR code all around the room and find me if you can't figure it out. And kind of explore on your own. You can click on each of these projects and see what they are, but we really began by looking at what's on the ground today and what's in the pipeline. Thanks to the work of Eric and his team, thanks to County Council, thanks to I see Councilman Mike Steekings in the back there, and the great investments of the city of Charleston, like the Ashley River crossing. So we started, baseline, what's on the ground today, what's coming. The beige is things like the West Ashley Greenway here. We've got in the black, we've got, Ashley River crossing and some of these others that are imminent, main road segment. So next, we took the draft proposed project list that Eric mentioned. These are the featured projects on the upcoming potential sales tax, and mapped those out and thought, we've got specific bike ped investments like the Better North Bridge up here, but we've also got road widenings out here, US 17 road widening, sort of in the western part of the county, that we're hoping will include accommodations for bike ped funding or for bike ped infrastructure. Next, we kind of started dreaming, and that's we sort of started saying, how can we leverage this opportunity to connect what's on the ground today, what's coming, with what could be coming in the next iteration of the sales tax. So we're gonna do a little tour around the county here in a second, but these orange dotted lines here are the advocacy group's proposed connections, and something that we'd like to see sort of further defined as this process goes along. So we'll start up here in North Charleston. As Eric mentioned, the Low Country Rapid Transit is this big long line, and we are very in support of County Council's direction of setting aside funding for connections to the Low Country Rapid Transit. We also added a project along Remount Road up here. There's I think neighborhoods have been asking for some streetscapes and safety improvements there. Down here we focused on a small gap between the North Bridge and Reynolds Avenue here, and how we might bridge that gap. It's just an example of what we're thinking in terms of the network-based approach. Helpful if we could see it. So here's the peninsula. I know most of us in this room are interested in this area. Down here we've got the Low Battery, which is wrapping up, I believe, or maybe even open now, and tying into the battery extension that is on that sales tax feature project list. Haygood Avenue here is another. But we thought, how can we bridge the gap between the Ashley River crossing here, the Low Country Low Line that is broken ground earlier this year? How do we get between those two using these TST investments? So we identified a gap here. This is on Fishburne Avenue, and here is UG Street. And thought about how can we bridge those two pieces of transformative infrastructure. And West Ashley, we're looking at potentially an extension of a shared use path that will potentially be included as part of the US 17 widening all the way out to Caw. We know there are a couple of Greenbelt property acquisitions that included a trail right of way in them. So could we fund those trails and kind of create that connection between suburban West Ashley and this amazing resource of Caw in that natural setting? So I won't go through every project in specific, but we'd love for you all to take a look and explore. I think Mount Pleasant is kind of the most fun part of our map because they have so much on the ground and in the pipeline already with Mount Pleasant Way. And we thought about, what are some Mount Pleasant Way segments that have already been identified that we can still link through, systematic TST investment. So yeah, just wanted to kind of walk you through this resource that we put together. We hope that you'll explore on your own. And just reiterate that we need increased bike ped funding to make these projects come alive and build this network that offers a real viable alternative to driving and recreation. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it off to Katie Zimmerman. we all know and love. And then we'll have an opportunity for an open Q&A here at the end. Okay. Okay, good. Yep.
I am notoriously bad with microphones, so please wave if you can't hear me. I'm just gonna be very brief. I'm the executive director of Charleston Moves. We advocate throughout Charleston County for safe and connected bicycle, pedestrian, and transit access. And really, I'm up in front of you to sum up why we asked you all to come here tonight. Why are we doing this? And our main intent was to make sure we are encouraging our fellow community members to engage in this process. Now is the time to tell the county what you think of the draft, what you'd like to see changed, what you love. Even if you don't support a sales tax, tell the county that. Make sure you are weighing in right now because they need all of the public input that they can get so that they create a program that meets the community's needs and what they want. So obviously, it's 9 different co-hosting groups tonight, and we don't agree on everything. So our different groups, very specific suggestions you can find again at that QR code. Jim has created a nice link tree that takes you to all of our different websites. So if you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I really wish I knew specifically what Charleston Climate Coalition would like to suggest about this, you can go and check that out. We're not going to push that on you all tonight. But the 2 big takeaways that our groups all agree on, that if you choose to take the survey, you choose to weigh in, we're hoping that you will suggest. One is specificity, transparency. You've already heard a lot about that. Eric discussed how that was a lot of the response with the failed 2024 referendum, with the first public comment period now. So laying out things like, for example, what's the split going to be for the Greenbelt allocation between urban and rural? Exactly, or not exactly, because we don't want to sort of paint staff into a corner. It needs change over time. But what is it that X percentage of dollars to public transit, what does that get us all? So giving a little more detail for all of these different things across the pie, so that all of us, when we go to the ballot, if this ends up on the ballot, we know a little bit better about what it is we are supporting, hopefully supporting. And 2, we want to make sure that, as Tori mentioned, as everybody's already mentioned this, all of these different pie slices work together. Ultimately, the transportation sales tax is a system. Greenbelt doesn't work without bike ped, which doesn't work without transit, which doesn't work without road investment. It all needs to work together as a system. And so what we want to see, what we want to make sure happens is every element is funded at a level that is equitable and that helps move the needle forward on that element. A great example, the one that Eric mentioned earlier about pavement. The county knows how much funding is needed to be allocated to the pavement program for things to actually improve versus scaling things back. For transit, CARTA has identified the amount of money that they know they could use to actually expand service. They've also identified the amount of money that if it was allocated, they would have to pull back on service. We don't want to see anything pulling back. We want to see everything successful and moving forward and getting us to the quality of life that I think we all want to see. So those are our 2 big asks that you all consider as you're weighing in, as you're taking the county survey. And then everything else that you want to tell the county, we just really want to make sure, take the survey, weigh in, participate, tell your neighbors, invite the county to come to your other neighborhood association meetings that aren't here tonight. All of those different things. We all need to be more engaged and more educated about all of this. So I will stop. I will get off my little soapbox. But again, the QR code, you can find the county's materials and our group's materials, all for whatever questions you have. And then, of course, if you signed up with your email at the check-in table, we're not going to put you on any lists, but we will follow up from tonight, reminding you of all of these different links and how, if you want to sign up, for updates or get information from different groups tonight, how you can sign yourself up for that. So, thank you.
Okay, now we have the Q&A and comment portion of the evening that can be directed either at the host orgs or at our county representative, Eric Adams. So without further ado, let's hear from y'all. What are you thinking? What do you need to know? Yes.
Well, I have a question for Eric, and that concerns one of the hidden costs of infrastructure projects that I just became aware of. When roads are widened, when infrastructure is built, the water company has to move the sewer lines, they have to move the water. The tax provides a small amount of money to the utilities, according to the water company guy, and they have to come up with the rest of the money to actually do it. And so one of the hidden costs of some of these projects is our water bill goes up to help cover the part of the utilities paying for as opposed to the state with the tax. And so what he wants is he wants a larger proportion of the tax to go to the utilities. But I thought the issue of the hidden cost should be brought up.
So there's some history, you're right, that is right, so. Anytime we're gonna build or widen a road, we've got to address drainage associated with that, typically, right? So then we're gonna have to put in drainage pipes and so forth, and anytime you dig under the ground, there's probably something there, whether that be water, sewer, cable, so forth.
This may apply to the overhead stuff too.
Yeah, overhead as well. So utility coordination is a big aspect to all of our projects. One thing just for perspective is if the utility company has prior rights, then we have to pay to move them and relocate them. So what does prior rights mean? That means they've established their own easement and gotten it through deed when they installed the line. If they did not, that means they went in there under encroachment permit into DOT or county or city right away. So they didn't have to pay for the right of way when they put their system in. So they got a deal on the front end. But they always knew when they got that deal, there was a potential in that encroachment permit that says, if we ever require you to move, you have to move out of the way. So it is unfortunate. Now, what I'll say to that is we try to design around and with those to minimize the relocations. We're not just going to come in willy-nilly and say, get your stuff out of the way. We're going to try to tweak, what's your elevation? Can we get our pipes deeper? Can we go over top? Can we put in conflict boxes? What are the potential solutions to minimize the cost of the utility relocates? Because those also take time too, because if you got to move those, that takes more time. There's also state law that stipulates how much we have to contribute into the major utilities. So we pay, don't quote me on this percent, but I think it's like 3% of the total contract cost the project will pay for. Anything above that, the utility has to pay for. So there's a lot to it. We try to work with them. They are a partner in the, because I'll say ultimately, it's all public infrastructure. The public's going to pay for it one way or the other, right? So we don't try to put on a hat of like, just get out of our way, right? Because we know that's going to affect the constituents that are the same constituents paying here. So we're going to try to work to minimize the overall total project cost. But it is a reality, and it is something that we try to offset and mitigate as best we can. And it's very expensive, especially the utility, the overhead utility power, very expensive to move.
Next question.
Wait a minute, let me see that. I may have missed this somewhere along. As a taxpayer, as a retired teacher, what is this costing each family? If this passes, on the average, what is it gonna cost each family?
So the estimate on the statistics I think were based on, it depends on your amount that you spend, right? Which would depend on the amount of your household income overall.
Right.
But it's a rough estimate is $127 a year, which is roughly about $10 a month. And I think that's based on like a $95,000 a year household income, which is a rough average, very average, but it's roughly $10 a month.
There, it's not a new tax, right? This is a continuation. Tax of your own.
Yeah, so there would be no change, and that's one of the important factors of this is there would be no change at the cash register with this. It's just the same. It would be an extension of what's already in place.
Next question, Nick?
Thank you to all the organizations that put this event together. I greatly appreciate the systems-based mindset with which we're approaching this. And we know, as Katie said, that a lot of these projects are layered, they're multidimensional. What are some other examples beyond the seawall project and the North Bridge replacement with the bike bridge, where you're creating multi-layered opportunities to address different parts of this infrastructural pie, while also addressing resilience and adaptation challenges that might be outside of the scope of what we would assume is part of this referendum?
So they all overlap in some essence. For example, one of the projects is North Charleston, Rivers at Durant Avenue. So it's a transportation infrastructure project, but is specifically linked to the Low Country Rapid Transit project, right? So that express bus, we can't have that getting stopped by a train because it's no longer express. So even though it's an infrastructure project, it's a transit project as well. So there's overlap there. In all of our infrastructure roadway widening projects, we're going to take a complete streets concept for multimodal transportation in context with whatever that project is. So it depends on the project. Where not always is a 10-foot multi-use path feasible or in context with the neighborhood or where the project might be. But some specific examples were given, or you can look at our track record of, Glen McConnell Parkway, for example, was one. Bees Ferry Road widening, 17 of Main will provide that connection. So we're always looking at those. We're looking at bus stops. So we'll get with CARTA, like, hey, where can we build a bus shelter here? Do you need space? So we're going to talk to them and look to identify as part of the project. We're also, from a resiliency standpoint, we're going to be looking at drainage and elevation of roads. Let's make sure we're addressing, when we just did a project over on Central Park in James Island, where we raised that road because it overtops. And then we also have a drainage problem upstream, and it's a tidally influence. So there's wetlands on the upstream side as well. But we want to get more water out quickly, stormwater out quickly, but we want to allow the tide so that we don't affect the saltwater environment upstream. So we did muted tide gates on that. We raised the road, so we get the resiliency there. We put the muted tide gates on, so we still allow the existing flow of tidal, but we're allowing more stormwater out as part of the project. So always looking at the overlap. So even though that's a transportation project, it really had a really strong resiliency / drainage element to it as well.
What's the timeline or status of the county council weighing in on the legality of the extension?
So question was legality of the battery extension on the referendum.
Is the county council?
So it's not county council decides if it is a approved project to move forward with or not. But actually the oversight of the sales tax funds is done by the State Department of Revenue, DOR. So they're the ones that come in and audit the county. So they recently came in and audited our transportation sales tax program. They're looking at all the money that we spent over the last, time period. What projects did we spend them on? What procurement method and so forth. So based on historical court cases as well in Richland County, Department of Revenue was the agency that was, as part of that court case, that was given discretion over appropriate use of sales tax funds. So the city of Charleston, along with some of our project team, has met with Department of Revenue on the battery extension and has said, in their opinion, it appears eligible. Now, there aren't plans to hand to them of this is exactly what is gonna be done, because the city's still working through the design process of how it's gonna look and so forth. But conceptually, they have given a verbal stance that they are okay with it. Will they give us something? Will they give anything in writing? If I were in their shoes, it'd be hard to give you something in writing if I don't know exactly what you're gonna do. But conceptually, they have verbally said that it's acceptable. Now, I've heard some people think the Attorney General should give an opinion on it. That would be the Attorney General's opinion at the time, that wouldn't necessarily be law, so. In full transparency, that's where we are. The Department of Revenue has kind of verbally, conceptually said it meets the transportation definition as they interpret the statute. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm getting out of my lane here. But because of all the overtopping of roads down by the hospital district, where the city has the documentation on how often those roads are closed. And there's a direct link of when those roads are closed, that creates traffic problems. Like people got to go around, the buses can't go through. So it's linked to transportation, and the city has been able to demonstrate that to the Department of Revenue. So that's what we got. That's where we're at with the process right now.
Next question.
Yeah, I guess on that point that Eric just made, and to the gentleman over here, I can think of a multi-layered project, and I guess maybe this is a bit of a pitch. One is called Cabin Corridor Extension. And it happens to be one of the future projects, and I think our Charleston Village Association Board passed a resolution last November in favor of urging county council support for that project. I just want to bring in how that touches a number of different layers. One, if everybody doesn't know, there's flooding routinely. It continues to fail because of the flood. And when it does, people can't exit the city. This is a major east-west artery. And there's a big pool that gets filled in there. It covers NUSC's campus, it covers Radcliffe Borough, it covers Halston Village. And when you think about that complexity on top of the development that is planned, NUSC extension, the LCR, the Low Country Rapid Transit Terminus, it's going to be located on Gatlin Street. The Ashley River Crossing, which Katie has been working on so many years, as well as Councilman Seekings, that all comes into this area. So this is a situation that's transportation impacted as well as flood impacted. And we think it deserves the highest priority for county council, and think it can affect many things, multimodal transportation as well as properties for residents and private and public investment. So it's a bit of a pitch, but we do think it has multiple layers to it that can benefit the community.
I think we got time for one or two more. Yeah.
As you guys know, I attended the meeting in Mount Pleasant on Monday, and I left with more questions than answers, particularly in regards to Greenbelt. I was so gung-ho on this when it was 20% Greenbelt, and then it got knocked down to 16. And then I found out that it's going to be split 50-50 urban to rural. And I'm particularly concerned having been in Mount Pleasant, where we have 2 green spaces that are now being used for 3 roads, 1 built, 2 proposed, and a sports complex that's got artificial turf planned for it, where there's woods and wetlands, and they're going to put a sports complex. So I wouldn't mind if Mr. Davis would get back up and explain to me again how that works. And I don't know how often this is, where to me, it seems like it's a bait and switch. There's a trust and transparency issue here. I mean, there's a lot of people that are still not trusting county council to do the right thing. And I think we need to be transparent, and we need to have integrity and agree. And I'm not saying that it's you. I mean, I don't blame in Mount Pleasant. for taking a green space and putting artificial turf down in a sports complex and building roads on green space. So if you could tell me a little bit more and convince me that this is really going to save natural habitat and not be used for roads and sports complexes and stuff that has nothing to do with nature, preserving land, providing space for wildlife, for natural drainage and filtration, trees for oxygen. Convince me that this is a program that doesn't need tweaking and that I can support it, even though it's been diminished. I'd love to see, Rob, I'd love to see this go back up another percentage point for green space. It seems like when we gave the 5% to Carta, 4% came out of green space. Why did green space take the big hit? I know Carta needed the extra money. Why did green space take the big hit to make up for Carta? So, I'd love to have some answers, because I've gone from being supportive of this to being back on the fence. And I campaigned really hard against it in 2024 because it was horrible. It's a horrible plan. And I complimented you guys for doing a better job, and you have done a better job. But I want to be convinced that this green space program is going to have integrity.
All right. David, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm good. I don't have Jim's mic. As I mentioned at the meeting earlier this week, the comprehensive Greenbelt plan lays out basically 6 different types of green space where Greenbelt funds can be used to purchase land, not to build parks or anything like that. One of those is active recreation, and sports fields and basketball courts and things like that are allowed under active recreation. That is so this specific project you're referencing is the Rifle Range Road Park, future Gary Santos Park. That was a partnership application for 2 large tracts of land between PRC, the Parks and Rec Commission, and the town of Mount Pleasant. The town of Mount Pleasant's portion of the property, which when they purchased this jointly, had not been identified where they were going to split that yet. It was always intended to be active recreation in a more developed park. I'll be happy to share that info with you. I've already shared it with some of the town council members from Mount Pleasant because they had questions as well. So when they were going through their process of splitting everything up and sending us conceptual plans to confirm that what they wanted to do confirms with their Greenbelt grant agreement. So when you're awarded that agreement is what governs uses on the property. We had some issues with it. And one of those was the large indoor event center and some of those more intensive uses. And what a lot of folks don't realize is there is a third parcel that was purchased by Charleston County Parks and Rec Commission and now owned by the town that has no Greenbelt restrictions. So a lot of those heavier uses, especially the building, the large building and a lot of the paved parking and all of that, we had to move to that non-Greenbelt site, saying that that was incompatible with their initial application, and to include a building and things like that would not be in line with Greenbelt. As far as the roads go, yes, there have been, I think there will be 3 road impacts by the time Billy Swells is finished. And the Greenbelt ordinance has a section that talks about conversions of Greenbelt property. So it specifically says if you want to convert a property out of green space, or if something happens and it no longer meets the definitions in Greenbelt, then you can get county council to approve one of 2 options really. One is getting an appraisal for that portion, in this case roadways, in today's dollars, and paying that back to the Greenbelt Fund, which is then reserved for future use. Or you can come up and find some other property that you would like to be green space and purchase that on your own. They have similar values, then we trade it. So 2 of the, let's see, there was the traffic circle, we've received payment for that. Billy Swells, we've received payment for that. With the one that goes through the middle that I can never get the name,
Ed Von Key.
Ed Von Key, correctly. We worked through that on a staff level and made the administrative decision that that was part of the park. So you had to, unless you wanted to access on Rifle Range Road. So both parks, the main entrances will be all Ed Von Key. We do allow roadways in the parks, especially in some of these older properties. I will tell you now that county council made a change a few years ago. They approved an impervious surface limit formula for some greenbelt projects. So now if that came through, we would be looking at impervious surface limits. But we can't retroactively go back when none of those limits were in place and enforce those. That,
Yeah, one more, with, Laurel Hill County Park, did you all use Greenbelt money for that?
no, sir.
That was PRC.
That was BRC. Yes, sir.
There's a road going through that too. Through the county park.
I'm not a county park guy.
I know, but I'm just saying. There are a lot of folks in North Mount Pleasant that are gonna be a single issue on this. And they don't want that road. I know there's a lot of people in this room that supported it. I did not. Because it is land that was set aside as green space and not be impacted by roads going through forest and wetlands.
Yeah, I'll say the road impacts, the situation I just described, it's pretty unique. I think maybe there have been 3 or 4 of those out of 244 greenbelt projects. And if you really want to look at the active parks that have been approved by county council, I'd be happy to get those figures for you, but my guess would be it's a very, very small portion compared with larger landscape wide conservation.
That makes me feel better. So the only problem is Mount Pleasant.
Thank you. All right, you're welcome. I think we have time for one more question in the back there. You're gonna mic coming to you.
My comments are specifically about Carter, and I apologize, this is not the correct group or place to address these, but I really appreciate both of you doing all of these projects, sound great.
Thank you. We talking to the mic. Yeah.
Thank you, sorry. I'll try to be quick. Hi, my name is Jennifer. I live in West Ashley and I work downtown. For the last 8 years, I relied on Carter to get to and from work, specifically the number 30 Savannah Highway bus and the number 33 Ashland River Road bus. Conservatively, I estimate that I have ridden these buses 3,500 times. That's an adequate sample. I don't care what else you do with this money. I think all these projects sound great, but please fix Carter. Carter has become an absolute nightmare. It is costing me and so many others time, money, and peace of mind. I now approach every commute morning and night with dread and apprehension, including from when my bus did not come this morning again. For the last 3 months, the bus situation has been absolutely terrible, with no sign that it's getting better or even being acknowledged. There's nothing about this on the Carter website. Numerous times I've been stranded on the side of the road waiting for buses that never show up, even though they are shown as on time in the computer system. The transit app and Google Maps will show that a bus is coming and that it's on time, and then it just disappears with no explanation. I have had to take several Ubers and lost many hours of work. I cannot afford this. Last week, my neighbor, who is a graduate student at MUSC, had to wait 2 hours in the morning for her bus, and then that same evening, she waited from 5 p.m. until 7:45 when the bus finally showed up. She was scheduled to give a presentation the next day, and instead of being able to focus on that, she had to spend nearly 5 hours on the side of the road waiting for a bus that is supposed to run every hour. I have pretty much abandoned the idea of trying to take my regular bus home because it has become so unreliable, and instead I'm taking a different route that drops me 1.5 miles from my actual bus stop. It's not a bad walk now, but as the weather gets hotter, it will become more difficult. While I do qualify for the senior discount, I am typically one of the younger people on this bus. I feel especially bad for all the seniors and other folks with mobility issues who are having to deal with this. I am very privileged. I have other resources. I have friends and family who can take me places. I'm in good health and I can walk to a stop farther away, but many people are not so lucky. Please do better, Carter. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is the perfect place that was that, actually. Thank you so much for sharing that. My understanding is that nearly all of Carter's funding does come from the half-cent sales tax. So if you are passionate about funding public transit in Charleston County, taking the survey, getting involved, letting folks know to get involved, and letting the county know that they need to be funding CARTA to a greater degree is something that you can do. And we all have a stake in this, right? We all have something that we're passionate about. I'm a climate activist. Fossil fuels are what are driving the climate crisis. And so bike ped infrastructure and public transit reduce that meaningfully. I have a big stake in this. Maybe you have a neighborhood project that's very important to you. Maybe you have a lot of investment in green space and want to see both different amounts of funding or different quality of funding. If you have any stake at all, we want to end the evening by, again, encouraging you, being cheerleaders for you, to let the county know now, because this is sort of the last major window we have before things sort of get very, very much locked in. And I would love personally to be at the ballots in November and voting for something that I'm excited by, that I feel like is modernizing low country transportation meaningfully. And if you also have a stake, if you want to see something like that, please follow our QR code, take that survey, learn more about the priority projects the county has to get opinions on those. Follow Jim's excellent story map, which has a lot of great details in there you can glean. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out on a weekday night, spend their time talking about the nitty-gritty of transportation funding policy. So thank you and have a good night.